All right, we're back. We're back with the family, the cybersecurity family. Asha, John, Kate, and David, thanks for being here again on the Leadership Care series. I want to continue starting with you, Asha, again, direct from Australia on one day later for us over here. I want to get into the thing that caught my attention so much when we were introduced, soft skills in cybersecurity. Can you describe the what, where, how of soft skills in this arena? And why do you think, if you will, leaders who care want cybersecurity talent from the graduates up to senior management that have that soft side?
Okay, so when I first started working, teaching into cybersecurity, it's as Bruce Schneier says, I thought it was all about, the mathematics, the cryptography. And then I realized about 12 to 15 years ago, I started teaching risk management into cybersecurity, or information systems rather. And I realized that it's not about the mathematics. The mathematics is great. It works. People are the weakest link. People are the ones who will break the system. And often they will break it not because they want to, but because they don't realize it. And so risk is what we have to look at. We have to manage that risk. And to be able to manage risk, we have to work with people. And to work with people, you cannot be a tech geek. You can't sit behind a computer and say, especially for cybersecurity. So with IT and coding, yes, you could do that. You could build a career over there. But with cybersecurity, you have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to, explain to them why cybersecurity. And especially you have to be able to explain to little kids what is cybersecurity. And that's what led me to understand. And so those are the few of the things that I try to get students to do. And I assess students: team building, being able to communicate verbally and written, being able to be creative, to be curious, to be able to actually take information from different sources and put them together, not to believe. And I think in some ways I've been looking at the saga of the fake news and everything else. Like, how do we, and I'm starting to feel, it's a cybersecurity problem. You have to be able to work out what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is fake. So if it is the least what I want to do, and this is what I've been doing through all my different networks, whether it is person-to-person networks or something on Twitter, I've been trying to get people to understand that the first thing you do when there is, for example, a scam call, you don't give information out. You often don't pick up a call that is, by an unknown number. You take that number, you Google it, you search for it, you find out more information. Don't believe everything. And that's what I'm starting to feel, that's the cybersecurity issue. And it's all about real, it's about real skills, the skills which you need in real life. So why should your work life and your real life be so different? We need the two things to, risk management. And one of the things I spend a lot of time is trying to get students to realize when I do information systems risk management, that it's not got to do with the computer alone. So I start to get them to think about crossing the road. How do you manage the risk of crossing the road? How do you manage the risk of your house or your kitchen not catching fire? And this is the same issues with, with climate change, with all of this. It's not like I am here and that is there. It is I am in it. What do I contribute to reduce it, to make it better?
It almost sounds like my parents telling me, don't believe everything you read in the newspaper and don't talk to strangers.
Yes.
Was it nice?
The high-tech version, Mark, the high-tech version of that.
There's nothing, I compare a lot of things to sports, and when you're not scoring goals, you go back to the basics of what do you need to do to get the opportunity to score.
That's right.
Hey,
that's
John,
right.
Continuing on, the future of work has almost become now what I call the present of work. It's been sped up like crazy. Where everybody's remote is prominent. If you could share with us a little bit about the seriousness of hardware hacking, from light bulbs to your laptop to whatever, and what do people and business leaders need to do to protect their data? Kind of goes a little bit with what she's teaching the young people. What do business leaders need to do, and parents and people to protect our data?
Yeah, it's sort of, we forget that all these great gadgets that we enjoy and make our personal and professional lives more interesting, more fun, more interconnected, just like we're doing now over Zoom, and we connected all of us on the East Coast, West Coast, and around the world, where Asha's sitting in Australia. You know, all these materials, when they come to their end of life, do need responsible destruction, recycling, whatever the appropriate word might be. But to think about it, when we got in the industry, Mark, there was no iPhone, there was no iPad, drones weren't part of our vernacular, Internet of Things didn't exist. You know, the Nest, the Ring, the Alexa, the wearables, and cars weren't computers on wheels like the EV cars, like Tesla is now. They're all computers on wheels. So when they come, and nor did GDPR exist. So the perfect storm is you have this proliferation of electronics that continue to come out every year. About 22,000 new SKUs come out a year in the electronics world. So the innovation is undying and marching forward every day, pandemic or no pandemic. And these materials are encasing our data in many instances. So when they come to their end of life, to both protect the environment and yourself, this stuff has to be destroyed appropriately and handled appropriately by responsible recycling companies like ours and many others that exist both in Australia, United States, and around the world. So you protect the data. When you refer to the Zoom boom and the pandemic that created a truncated boom in technology, Mark, at home technology, you have a crossover of your personal electronics with your business electronics. And because things move so fast and happen so quickly, people are using their personal electronics for business purposes, their business electronics for personal purposes, and that's all okay. The thing that would be wrong is if it got into the wrong hands, when these materials, whether it be a hard drive, a cell phone, a laptop, a tablet, came to their natural end of life and ended up in the hands of hackers who had bad intentions. Because not only do people want to mine for gold and silver and other precious metals that come out of old electronics, but there's people now around the world that have adverse positions to big corporations, adverse positions to our homeland security, that will mine for our data on a regular basis and actually purchase these electronics just for mining data purposes. So responsible recycling and responsible hardware data destruction are the mantra of our company, and really of the next 10 or 15 years to come, as we continue to turn over our electronics faster than ever and actually create new electronics faster than ever before.
Yeah, it kind of, I was just talking to an RBC executive, and we were talking about, a couple of things he said. Some people's trash is another person's treasure.
True.
This line. And he also said, do you remember, and I do remember, I worked at Place Ville Marie for Deloitte in Montreal, and Royal Bank of Canada was my bank. And the first ATM, this is showing me, came up. And we talked about how people were worried about the security of going to the ATM back then. So how times have changed, quickly. But it's interesting because they were worried about, well, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do that with the ATM. So, hey, Kate, I think you might be the only one here that's written a best-selling book. I'm not sure if anybody else.
She has too. It's a great book.
I know, it's The Kingdom of Lies, unnerving adventures. I love that part of it. Could you talk about, unnerving adventures in the world of cybercrime? Can you talk about, first of all, is it based on real stuff, or is it based on it could happen? And
oh no, it's definitely based on real people. I did about 100 different interviews with different people over the course of prepping for it, and picked sort of the most interesting ones and focused on them. But I think what's a little different about it is that it's a book about cybersecurity that really doesn't talk about cybersecurity very much. It's an examination of the people who are either doing the crimes, who are involved in the other side of the equation, or the people who are trying to track them down, what motivates them, what is different about them. And what I tried to emphasize was that, in none of these cases were the people who started into this field and became either very successful at being criminals or at being good guys. And in none of those cases were they geniuses or people who were exceptionally technologically proficient. They found a sort of sideways entry into the field. And one of the things that we do in my company that's a very popular program, it's called Retrain. We go in to a corporation, instead of doing a risk assessment, we'll do a skills assessment. We'll see who in the organization has skills that you could apply to your open cybersecurity jobs. And it's amazing what these companies find out. I can't even tell you how many administrative assistants and secretaries have just tested off the charts, because what do they do all day? If they're keeping scammers or just people within the company who are trying to get on the CEO's calendar, calling all day, making up stories, trying to weasel their way in. And they just, they back those people away. They protect that office. They protect the information flowing into that office. And those skills, it takes 6 months of training to get them into a program management role. But those people are excellent cybersecurity people, and it's a win-win for everybody. They get a chance to join a career that's really taking off. It's not a dead end. The company doesn't have to spend all of this money to hire new people. I just think that, there's a lot of gatekeeping in cybersecurity. I'm sure if David can definitely speak to this, but as a woman, I get to experience it places like Black Hat, where I get asked where the coffee is and stuff like that. But it's, I want to open the doors to people and say, you can be a part of this if you're 80 years old, if you're 10 years old, if you're anywhere in between, if you've never worked in the field, join us, and you might be surprised at how great you do at it.
Super cool. And, David only brings nations and economies and worlds together. That's all David really does.
Well, at the end of the day, there are people, to go back to Asha's point and also to Kate's point. Yes, I think we need more diversity of perspectives, experiences. I celebrate exactly what Kate's doing, because if we don't, we're actually missing out on the richness of everything that in terms of talent that people can bring.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, David, too. And I'm semi-joking when I say you bring nations and economies, because you kind of do.
I don't always succeed, too. I'm just saying, sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't.
Well, you may succeed more than some of the governments themselves, but
humbled, thank you.
But you pursue ways to bring them together using new technologies that empower people. And we've talked about how business leaders who care, if you will, can and probably are the ones that are going to make the most difference out there with respect to training, with respect to engagement, with respect to experiences for people. Can you talk a little bit about how do you determine where and how you start and execute, and cybersecurity is managed with all the interactions that you've got going on? How does that work?
Well, if anything, it begins exactly with listening. I mean, you have to listen to where are people at in their journey with understanding the risk. I mean, I think if anything, the last several years, and I'm sure Kate and Asha and John can relate, I mean, we're dealing with multiple levels of challenges here that range from the very sophisticated nation state actor to the organized group of whether they're in the for-profit mode as criminals or they're doing it on behalf of a proxy, and then those people that may have just downloaded a kit and maybe there's even an insider threat. And so it's you have to recognize there are all these different things that are coming together, and at the end of the day, it is about people. It's also recognizing, though, what's different about 2020, say, than 2010 and 2000, and also what's the same. Asha was talking about the misinformation, disinformation challenge. I mean, it's worth noting in our US history, back in the early 1800s, we had John Adams and Thomas Jefferson doing misinformation to each other. So this is not necessarily a new problem. John Adams was claiming that Thomas Jefferson was the devil, like literally the devil. I don't think he really was. And Thomas Jefferson was claiming that John Adams was actually planning war against the French when in fact he wasn't, but that was a goal to actually unseat him as president. So nothing's new under the sun. Humans haven't changed. What has happened is, the great news is we've democratized technology. The challenging news is we've democratized technology. And so things that could only have been done by very sophisticated nation state actors 30 or 40 years ago now can increasingly be done by individuals or a group of individuals. And so this decade ahead, that's exactly why we need to do what Kate's doing, which is bring this wealth of talent that has unfortunately not been allowed into the cybersecurity world, and it has been embraced as it should have been, because we are going to be facing increasingly the good and the bad and the challenging of democratization of tech. That most people will use it for mundane purposes or good purposes. Some will use it for less than good purposes. We can't put human nature back in the box. But really what I try to do is listen to where people are in their journey, and then with that, try and figure out exactly, as Kate was sharing, what are the natural strengths that you can bring, or the talent, the strengths that you may be missing, but also where are your existing narratives or labels or misinformation, where are they holding you back or causing you to miss things that you need to take a look at?
Yeah, that's super cool. It kind of brings me back to Asha a little bit. How do we combine the now thankfully accepted soft skills? And I've had so many executives tell me, it's so much easier now. I don't have to pretend that I know everything. I can actually be vulnerable. My job's easier. And I think they're amazed that actually happens sometimes, that their job's easier. But Asha, how do we combine your soft skills with the education that Kate and everybody's talking about, technical skills, if you will, and at the same time, I don't know if we're teaching them what's right or wrong, but how to prevent wrong and how to encourage right way of moving forward?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we are trying to do in ours. So as you pointed out, we at RMIT we have a Master of Cybersecurity, which has been running for over 20 years this year. And what we tried to do is we started off, it was more mathematical and technical. And then as it evolved, and we listened to what industry wanted. And they did not speak of soft skills, but they spoke of risk management. And so when we brought that in, to be able to get students to do it at the higher level, you have to inculcate it through. So those things that we are learning has sort of, instead of rising up, it's also percolating down into the bachelor's degrees, into the schools. Everything now is, how do you work with each other? And even little kids, when we read to them, we expect them to respond to us. It's no longer, I don't know how it was before, because I can't remember really, but it wasn't that, you just read and they're just a mirror. We now want them to interact. So, and I know when I read, I have a granddaughter, and when I read to her, this is on, on Google Duo or Teams, or no, not Teams, FaceTime. I try to get her to answer questions. I don't just listen, get her to listen. I actually want her, and that is how it is percolating through. And also what we do is, one of the things I find very difficult is getting students to realize this is important. If that doesn't, so the industry needs to put that in as well, of how important it is to industry. And then that message will come. So we need the melting of the minds together, the melding of putting together what we teach and what industry wants. So being able to say, no, I don't know everything. So some of the skills we teach them is like, this is what your CEO would want to hear. This is how you say it. This is how you keep your job. This is how you make sure that they understand that they cannot bypass the cybersecurity measures you're putting in. Because what is going to happen if two CEOs can't talk to each other on your cyber secure channel? They're going to find another way of going around it, and we don't want them to go around it. So we need to be able to talk, and only by talking we will know what the problems are. So being responsive, so all of those soft skills, That is, and all of you, we have kids. That's what we need to develop with them, isn't it? Even if you have never used it, once you have kids, we really learn soft skills because everything we did before doesn't work anymore.
We may learn the soft skills, but we may learn it the hard way.
That's
So,
right.
you never know.
Yes.
It's a graduate course very fast.
Yes.
Exactly. Hey, John, speaking of talking, so I have a client. It's the largest residential real estate developer in the United States, and they have smart homes. And so we've been talking about hacking into the light bulb that's connected to the internet. And you talked before about, people are using their laptops for everything and their iPhones for everything. It's all combined now. When it's time to change my laptop and iPhone, what do people think of initially? Like, where do they put it? And the second thing I wanted to ask you is, to protect the environment and the data and all that. The second thing I want to ask you is, what about the least realized tech, like a light bulb or the refrigerator or things like that? That if I'm a hacker and I'm basic, I'm thinking, okay, they're using it for business. If I can hack, and I talked to my client about this, I can hack into their refrigerator, which then gets me to their laptop, which then gets
Right.
Right. So talk about that.
Well, the Ring and the Ring for sure has been a great gateway into people's homes and private lives. Cars are really the most unexpected. We've picked up many car companies, including Tesla, as clients, because when you get in a car, rent a car, lease a car, buy a car, they'll unwittingly, they'll ask you, do you confirm or deny something? You press the button because you think it's asking you something else, and before you know it, you've downloaded your entire laptop or cell phone right into your car's hard drive. And again, a lot of this is done without malice, just to connect us, to make our lives more interesting and more fun. But we go through our lives enjoying the seamlessness of it now. And then the end of life, this stuff has to be at least treated the right way. And then the people in those decision points sometimes don't even understand it themselves. I still have people at very large corporations or government entities, when they give me back 10,000 laptops to recycle, 20,000 phones, 50,000 hard drives, their first question is, oh my gosh, these are like gold bars. Can I get a huge rebate because this is like gold? And I explained to them, there's so little gold now, there's trace amounts of gold in this stuff, that there's no rebate. This is not Sanford and Son or some scrapyard here. This is a fee for service industry. And when you want it done the right way, you gotta, just like doctors, lawyers, or other, or accountants or other great consultants, you gotta pay to, there's no such thing as free recycling. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as free hardware data destruction. Just like there was no such thing as free paper data destruction with Shred-it and Iron Mountain. It's not free. Nothing's free. It's a service that you got to pay for because people have put a lot of time and energy and technology behind doing it the right way. And so cars, the Internet of Things, as you said, the white goods now are all talking to each other, including talking to us, that your refrigerator is out of milk and eggs, and it will reorder it for you and have it at your house ready when you get home. That stuff all needs to be handled the right way when it comes to its natural end of life, Mark.
So I got two quick questions on that. Can corporate leaders care about their people, provide a benefit to help protect them potentially, as a service to help them be protected, with what they're doing? And also, there's a company like a real estate developer that sells smart homes. Is there any liability in that with technology and them getting?
Great question. Probably when they sell the house, the liability ends there for the most part, because the technology is embedded in the house. It's a great legal issue. It's hard to parse. I'd say it probably cuts off there and would extend then to the user. And it would be, it's almost like buyer beware. Once the user buys the house and the technology that's contained therein, it's up to them to use it responsibly. Just like it's up to us, to not go 95 miles an hour after having 3 shots of tequila on the highway at night, you know, it's hard to blame the car company when you're going 95 miles per hour and you took a drink. In terms of, what was the other question, Mark? The housing one I got. We'll go back to
No,
the first.
I was just thinking, you know, companies, a lot of times they either give
Yeah.
laptops or whatever.
That's happening more. So more companies are saying, hey, we're not just going to be green and good, do the right thing with our own technology in our offices or in our data centers. They can give options, especially now that so many people are working from home. We have a box program where we ship boxes out to every zip code in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. So they'll come to us and say, hey, we want you to be able to avail your box program to all of our employees working from home. So when they have old electronics to get rid of, ship them a box and let them fill it up and ship back to one of your 8 facilities and then destroy everything responsibly. So then there's a peace of mind for the corporation and also then for the employee. Everybody wins. The environment wins, the corporation wins, even the employee wins, because all their personal data besides business data is protected in that process. So there is corporations that are starting to step up and go way beyond just the walls of their offices now or their other assets. They're thinking of their employees and also thinking of the employees unwittingly with no malice, crossing over their business and their personal technologies. And they say, let's just protect it all by giving them this opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been asked a little bit more than ever, and we're getting a client is to show that we actually have cybersecurity insurance now sometimes too.
The problem basically, if I could add a bit about the real
Sure.
estate and that issue with the Internet of Things, is that at this point, the laws aren't there yet, but there are lawyers who are specializing in information security law. So that is coming.
Yeah, that's
It's
coming,
like somebody giving you, you know, and most of us know, I mean, cybersecurity experts know that when you get an admin account with, you need to change the default password. But we cannot assume that the person who's buying a house knows that. It's like you can get, I was hearing this case the other day, you can get a Bosch hot water system which you have to use Bluetooth, and the password is written on the box. And it is actually, and the person was telling this to me, was that the actual hot water system was put in such a way that the neighbors could see the password, but they couldn't.
Oh my gosh.
and that is going to be a problem. It is only a matter of time before the law. The problem with cybercrime, and Kate will possibly, add to this, the problem is that cybercrime is just that one step faster than the law. So how do we beat cybercrime?
Well, Kate, you've written about cybercrime. Can you comment on this?
I've got so many case studies in my mind. Actually, there's a really great one out of Australia that I think illustrates, how we have not really thought of all of the possibilities. And it's actually from the early 2000s. There was a man who worked for a regional wastewater treatment facility. Do you know what I'm talking about, Asha? Do you know where I'm going with this? Okay. Yes. So he apparently was a very disgruntled, he was a very good hacker, and he was able to build a device in I believe in his car that he could drive, and it could remotely activate this wastewater dumping action that ended up flooding this entire town, including their hotels and everything with waste, with raw sewage. So is that a cybersecurity problem? It's actually a perfect example of when cybersecurity melds with your physical security. So that's something that we're most worried about. A lot of these back and forth espionage from foreign countries, it can be very serious. But when it comes to something like the security of dams, the security of water treatment, what's being added to the water and how much, when it comes to obviously nuclear facilities, banks, there's actually a little known program in the United States, and it hasn't been very prominently advertised, but it's called Sheltered Harbor. David, I don't know how familiar you are with Sheltered Harbor,
yes.
but I worked on it a great deal before I went into journalism. And it's a program through which the banks are able to back up, and these are the major banks, they're able to sign on to it. The US government originally wanted to make this not an optional program, but it is now, where they sign on and they create secure data backup facilities in the event that there is a major incident that made it impossible for the banks to reconcile their balances. You can imagine if an entire bank's balance sheet was entirely wiped out and you go to check your account and nobody knows how much money you had in your account anymore. That's actually been a long time fear of some of the big central banks. So, you know, there's a lot of interaction, of interoperability that comes into what we fear most about cybercrime. I think number one on my list is just the lone wolves. You know, if you think a lone wolf attacker can do a lot of damage with a gun, you know, in a cybersecurity context, somebody who goes off the handle and has those skills can do an enormous amount of damage. And so, you know, the future is really trying to weed those individuals out. That's my opinion.
Well, that does lead me to you, David. And I saw Start. we're doing some research work for a big space exploration company now, and the founder said he used to love Star Trek. Goes back to John, the garbage guy. He had saw Star Trek, and so he's got a space exploration company now. We talked about a Star Trek show, a little bit unnerving, but it was a Star Trek show that showed clean war. They didn't want to have war anymore, so they fought each other and bombed on the computer areas. And those areas were defined as being bombed, so they protected the property. Interesting enough, it was a clean war because the people that would have been there at the time had to go to chambers to basically die. And that was the clean war, rather than bombing people and everything. That was a clean war. This is Star Trek, folks, like way back. So I was going to ask you, John, a clean war with cybersecurity, basically, in so many aspects can happen here. I mean, all the countries are kind of hacking into each other, I'm assuming, some way or another. But how do we feel safe with respect to not that devastating where we have to go like that, but how do we feel safe from a new clean war?
I'm not, that's beyond me. I think that's better for David.
That was to David. That was to David.
All right, no worries. You said to John, so I wanted to make sure to interrupt. So
yeah, that's David.
That was to David.
You want to tee up the question again, and I'll answer it. So how about that? I can just jump right in. I'll just jump right in. I think I know what you're asking.
Yeah.
So you need to recognize that there are conflicts going on regularly in cyberspace, and they're just below the headlines. I mean, it's not a question of, is this going to happen? It is happening. And, you know, I'm sure Kate is familiar that there was some, in the early 2010s, there were some things happening behind the scenes in which the banks were targeted by a nation state actor that was trying to essentially deny access to the banks by tying up their websites. And that was believed to be associated with a nation state actor. And that's just one example. I mean, now we're talking about SolarWinds. I'm sure we will untangle that, and there'll be a very interesting story to be revealed there. But also recognizing that there's also, as Kate was mentioning, like sort of the lone wolf or the one-offs. You know, leading up to the election, there was some very interesting rumors that were going around that, you know, that possibly the son of the now president's laptop had been discovered, and that there may have been things on there. And I think, you know, again, the whole story is probably somewhere in some files underground, but I think if you look at it, it was a combination of maybe there were some things, but a lot of it was also misinformation wrapped around it. And that points to how, if you really want to weaponize a cyber attack, it is both do something and then have misinformation wrapped around it as to did it happen or did it not happen, so that now you've polarized people even more. And what we're really seeing, especially in places like the United States and Canada and Europe as well, you can have a damaging effect with minimal investment simply by creating the perception that something may or may not have occurred, or causing division in our own populations, which is why education is so key. So can you cause physical harm with cyber events? Yes, certainly. I mean, especially with critical infrastructure and things like that. But even more importantly, can you pull apart the very fabric that holds together societies that are open, that encourage freedom of speech and things like that? That to me is more disturbing, because we do not censor what people say. We do not filter what everyone says online. And so when you weaponize the narratives combined with some cyber activities, and the good news is, I mean, again, that example I gave recently of what may or may not have happened with a laptop of a family member of the president, the press was at least a little bit more judicious in handling that versus, say, just even 3 or 4 years ago, where if it was something that was a story, you know, when it leads, they would have just led with it, as opposed to recognizing maybe I'm playing directly into the hands of what these people want. And so I think we have some really serious questions. As John was mentioning, you know, we now have general data protection, GDPR in Europe. California has its own rule that hasn't necessarily been brought up to the federal level in the United States. Then at the same time, you go to, say, a country of 1.4 million people, sorry, 1.4 billion people in Asia, which basically says all your data belongs to the government, regardless of whether you're a private citizen, a company. Even if you're if you're visiting as a foreign individual, it is actually illegal not to have your data be visible to that government. And so I would say anyone that's traveling over there, once we start to be able to travel again, I am just waiting for GDPR to collide head on with how China approaches its cyber regime.
Yeah, no kidding. So just to conclude then, what are you each most grateful for, most hopeful for, with all going on with in the world right now, between fast moving technology, pandemics, et cetera, et cetera? What are you most grateful and hopeful for? And I guess we'll start back with Asha.
Human ingenuity. That's what I'm most, that even though we have so many problems, I believe that humans will come up with solutions as well. I just hope that governments will react fast enough that those solutions can be applied. Because each of us, as somebody said yesterday, each of us is just a drop, but altogether we are an ocean. But those oceans need to be activated by the government. Otherwise, we are going to be little ponds who are desperately trying. And this is what happens, especially in the middle of Australia. There is this big lake which dries up totally. It comes up to little ponds, you know, it dries up to little ponds, and the fish or whatever are trying to get to the next big pond, which may or may not be there. You don't know if it's there. I mean, from the point of view of the fish. So we are like that. So I'm really grateful and really happy, you know, really positive about that it's possible. But I'm also, you know, worried that the governments may not react fast enough.
John, what about you?
I'm grateful for, well, I think Asha really said it all. I don't think there's much more to say than that. But to add on to that, I'm grateful for great leaders like you, Mark, because without people like you and that are leading the way and platforming these critical problems and the possible solutions, that education wouldn't get out there and people wouldn't even understand what the problem is and what the possible solutions are. So I'm grateful for you. Thank you for including me in this wonderful group of human beings today that are far above me in terms of intelligence, but at least this little kid from Queens got to be a garbage man and got to live his dream. So, but thank you, Mark, for putting this together. Seriously, it goes a long, long way and speaks volumes about you.
Oh, you say that to all the guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Kate?
Yeah, this was great, and thank you as well for this conversation. I'm going to do just, reiterate what everyone has said, but I'll do a little plug for some work that I've been doing, which I myself am a survivor of domestic violence, and I do a lot of work here in New York City with the shelter organization that helped me in my time of need. And we have done a lot of training, skills training with women who have come in, maybe haven't, had a job for 10 years, have not managed their money. And we have actually found that a lot of them make great cybersecurity people. They come in with this natural paranoia. They have a lot of skills as far as making sure that, their own homes and their own devices are secure. And it's actually a great transition. We've seen some real success stories. And that has taught me that, you can actually use your traumas to your advantage. This has been a really traumatic year for everyone. So I'm really hopeful that we can all use whatever we've been through to our advantage in the future.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Really quick, we work with Trauma Free World, which does trauma counseling around the world, and people in digital education. And it's a great point you make. There's a lot of hope in both of those together. David.
Well, maybe sort of building on what Asha, John, and Kate just said, what makes me actually hopeful? It's of leaders, especially leaders that are coming from the private sector that may have only initially thought of thinking about profits, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. Profits are what's necessary for private sector to succeed, but are thinking beyond that and thinking about having a sort of a second or a triple bottom line and making sure they're doing good in the world. Because to Asha's point, and I say this as someone who has spent a long service working both in government, working with militaries and working with different governments, I do not think they will be fast enough to deal with the speed of change that we're going to be seeing in this space. And that the only way that open societies like us will be able to survive the next 10 years will be if individuals from the private sector think beyond just their own for-profit interests, that they actually think about education, they think about involvement, and they think about, how can we actually increase world stability and at the same time keep all the values that we have as open societies and the value of freedom and of choice. And then to Kate's point, I'm a big believer, in any situation you have a choice to be either a survivor or a victim. And I think if anything, the last 10 years, we've had some different events happen that's created awareness of this risk. I've had a wonderful opportunity. I continue to work very closely with Vint Cerf. Obviously, he feels like the internet he is one of the people that helped create TCP/IP and give birth to it. But he's also a little bit challenged because it seems like it's now going through the very awkward, rebellious teenage years that are not everything that we would hope it to be. But if anything, maybe I'm hopeful we can take what we've experienced in that and say, we've got some really key choices that are going to be so fundamental to make in the next 3 to 4 years if we want to keep openness, freedom, trust happening. Because otherwise, what we may see is that autocracies will outperform because they control the narrative, they don't ask your choice, and by the way, they censor everything. And that's not the future I want to see in 2030. And so if I'm hopeful for anything, it's that we can use the past to inform the present and the future. And then the last one thing I want to say, I'm also grateful for more women leaders. And I say that because when I did a PhD, I was looking at when do more people make better decisions. And the reality is there's three scenarios in which more people make better decisions. One is equal turn taking, sort of like what we did here. 2 is active listening, when you can actually be able to repeat back what you heard someone say. And then 3, a higher ratio of women to men usually leads to better outcomes in decision making. So I'm thankful for that as well.
No, that's awesome. Part of the reason he says that, he's got some great women that surround him and make him a lot smarter.
100%. 100%.
The other thing is I've been able to work closely with David on an initiative called Business for Peace, where we're bringing people together. And there's a reason you guys are here, because you are leaders who care. And like John, I don't say that lightly, because it's so important that the business leaders do care, and you can make money and do good at the same time. So thank you all for participating. Thanks for being friends, new friends and less new versus old friends. And really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thank
Thank
you.
you.